Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Operations and Public Safety Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, September 21st, 2021, and I'd like to welcome anyone that is joining us today, either here in the audience or through the Facebook City of Kent page, YouTube, Kent TV 21, or anyone that's dialed in this afternoon. We will get started with the first item on our agenda, which is the roll call. So, Kim, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Council President. Council President Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce.
Here.
Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud.
Here.
Councilmember Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next up is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes from councilor staff?
Yes, Madam Chair. Staff proposes to remove item 5D because Chief Padilla will fold that into his presentation on the council agenda later this evening.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our agenda is approved. Next up, we have the approval of the minutes, and that would be from our September 7th, 2021 meeting. Anyone have any questions or changes? All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are passed. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we will move on to the business of our agenda. The first item is the payment of bills, and that is something that comes to us through email. So again, do we have any questions on that? All right, may I have a motion to approve the payment of bills?
So move.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will move that on. Thank you, everyone. Next up, welcome Michelle Ferguson. Information only, the July monthly financial report.
Okay, good afternoon, Council. I'm Michelle Ferguson, the Financial Planning Manager, and I'll be presenting an overview of the July 2021 monthly financial report. So highlighted at the bottom of the slide is going to be sales tax revenue. And I wanted to highlight that because, as you can see, the sales tax is coming in very strong like it has been over the last few months. So on average, monthly sales tax revenues are coming in about a little higher than they were during the same time in 2020. And that's kind of notable because up until June of 2020, we were receiving sales tax annexation revenues which equaled about $450,000 a month. So if this trend continues, the city could receive roughly $24 million in sales tax revenues in the general fund, which would be about $350,000 more than what was received in 2020, which in the 2020 revenues included $1.75 million in the annexation revenue. So at the top of this slide is the utility tax revenue. And I highlighted this one because you can see that there's an uptick in revenues in July. And a few months ago, I mentioned that there was a change in how the city was able to receive cable utility tax per the state auditors. Since these taxes are no longer allowed to be directly receipted into an internal service fund, they had to be transferred into the general fund. It's a one-time transfer of $830,000. So on a monthly basis, you'll see these revenues increase by about $140,000, but it's going to be offset by a transfer out of that $140,000 each month back into the IT fund. Below that is going to be the other taxes, which is mainly comprised of B&O tax, but also a small portion of admissions and gambling tax revenues. So it looks like this fund these revenues are coming in under budget, and that is correct for this month. But the second quarter B&O payments are received usually in July, but sometimes those lag into August, and so next month's report you're going to kind of see that even out. So this slide is a little bit different than I normally show. Now that the year is halfway over, we have a little bit more data to be able to kind of forecast estimated actuals. So this slide in orange at the end, you'll see the estimated actuals compared to budget. So there are 4 revenue categories that don't seem like they're going to make it on budget for the year. And those are other taxes, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, and miscellaneous revenues. The good news is that they are coming in higher than the 2020 actuals, but they are trending upwards, but it looks like it's just going to take a little bit longer for them to bounce back to where they were before the pandemic hit. So the Capital Resources Fund was budgeted to use $2 million of fund balance in 2021. Early estimates are showing that the fund balance will actually increase by over $6 million by the end of this year. This is due to the restoration of SST revenues. So a $3.6 million back payment from 2020 revenues has already been received, and we will also receive another 1.8 roughly in revenues later this year for our quarterly payments. Sales tax revenues are also coming in higher because they're split between the general fund and capital resources fund. So they're estimated to be $1.2 million over budget. And REIT revenues to date are already $2.8 million over budget. So likely that will grow as the months go on. And below that, the criminal justice is highlighted for their revenue impact as well. They were budgeted to use roughly $500,000 of fund balance, but instead they'll likely have $1.2 million positive going into fund balance this year. And that is due to the school zone cameras and the red light cameras. So over the last 3 months, the school zone cameras are averaging $260,000 in revenues a month, and the red light cameras are averaging $245,000 a month. So on this slide, the sewer fund is highlighted. This is to show that this was under budgeted, so there will likely be a budget change at the end of the year to increase revenues and expenditures. So it's not going to be a hit to the fund balance, it's just a little under budgeted. And this last slide is for the liability insurance. We've talked about it before, but just wanted to show that estimated expenditures are expected to come in about $1.8 million over budget, and this is due to increases in the liability insurance costs and judgments and damages. This increase in expenditures is partially offset by a $550,000 reimbursement cost for charges above the retention threshold, and so this fund will also likely need a budget change by the end of the year. Any questions?
No questions? All right, thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate it. Next up is Chief Padilla to talk about the media forensic software contract.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for having us tonight. I have Detective Singyao here with me tonight. He's our subject matter expert, so if there are any technical questions, I'm going to look to him and bring him on up here. So tonight, we are asking for council authority, seeking authority to allow or authorize Mayor Ralph to enter into a contract with Gladiator Forensics to purchase software equipment, licenses, and maintenance fees for a total of $139,298.52 for the initial 5-year term, with options to extend the contract annually thereafter up to a maximum contract term of 10 years. So we have a condition where we could extend year by year with a max increase of 2%. So there's the ask. Let me tell you what it's about and why we need it. As you are aware, for several years now, a major component and a growing need for our investigations is cell phone and wireless data forensics. I spoke to our detectives commander today, and it is more and more, this is a big component of what we do in order to solve criminal cases. So it's something we've needed and have been using for years. We're talking about some of the biggest issues in our community, missing persons, and then our major crimes such as our shootings and our homicide cases. And so this is the need and the work that's been going on. Currently, we access data through cell phone companies in a couple of ways for those cases. The first way is if we have exigent circumstances. So as some of you have heard about and read about this week, we had a shooting over the weekend. One of the ways we located the victim in that was through cell phone data, through an exigent circumstance request, which allowed us to find the deceased male. Unfortunately, it wasn't in time, But it's that type of thing that's ongoing all the time that we use it for. Another more positive example was the missing girl we had down on Meeker Street a few months ago, the autistic gal. Although we couldn't ping her phone because it was left at home, she didn't have access to it, we were able to get up and gather information that showed us where she might be located based on her cell phone habits. And so that led the detectives to the area in which to start canvassing and looking for her. So you can see, and that led to discovery of the video and eventually her. So real life scenarios, we use this all the time. It's very beneficial. We also use it in our major crimes, and a lot of it has to do with putting pieces together as to once we have probable cause for someone, looking to see where they were, can we place them at the scene. It's also important with eliminating people from being suspects. If we can show that they were somewhere else through their cell data, that's helpful as well. It is one piece of a very complex puzzle that we put together for prosecution. And lastly, we do use and that's through a judge's order, by the way. We can only access that type of information by a signed search warrant that's reviewed by a prosecutor and then signed by a Superior Court judge. So there's safeguards there. The last part of it is to look for fugitives. So we have our person, we have our homicide suspect, we have probable cause, we have a warrant signed by a judge, and now we are able to gather information for that purpose and locate the person and arrest them. So currently, our detectives do this in a very rudimentary way. They get the data from the cell carriers, and then they have to spend hours, days, and sometimes weeks to go through it, put it together, do an analysis, and do that, and it takes a very, very big amount of time. Gladiator, and I get that the name's a little unfortunate, but Gladiator software has come up with a suite that does this automatic. So we still, same process, still safeguards in terms of the information, who has it, but these systems do the work for our detectives and bring the investigation time down from weeks and days to hours and days. And that is a huge benefit. It's hugely efficient. And as you can tell, we would very much like to have this software, and we think it's justified. So there is the ask, and I'll pause there for any questions.
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you brought this to us before. Just some clarified question. So, Chief, who will have access to this? Would it be just you and your leadership team, or anybody on the department could use this here?
Great question. Only the investigators and
Investigator?
the prosecutors would have access to it. I do not get access to this data, nor do I want access to the data.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And as I read this contract, it said can be extended for 2% annually over the amount charged for the prior year fee. I'm not sure I understand that. So do that mean if I extend it for 5 years, that means it'll be like a 10% charge?
Maximum on top
Maximum
of that, yes.
10%, okay. And who else uses software? Any of your peers use this software today?
I checked in that. In fact, that was a great question I followed up on from earlier. We would be the first in Washington State, but it is being used in other places across the country. Primarily, the federal government uses it. So you're talking agencies like the FBI and DEA.
And why are the other units not using it yet, you know?
I think it's coming.
It's coming, okay.
One of the major reasons, and I'm going to toot our own horn here, Detective Singyal has over the years become a regional expert in this realm of forensics and video and that type of media forensics, to where the point sometimes the federal government asks for his expertise to help on major crimes. And so because we have our in-house expert, he leads the way. We're kind of also ahead of the curve in terms of looking at how to do this better. It's also a pressure point, as we'll talk about a little bit tonight, when we look at resources, particularly for violent crime. I have to find a way to do this more efficiently, and so we are looking all the time. And so we wanted to see if we could take advantage of this. And I do want to say, we didn't cover this, but we are using existing funds to pay for this. We're not asking for new money. That was an important point I should have said earlier.
And my last question, if something going on in Des Moines where they need help, and or this allow you to use this type of support for them as well too, or is it for Kent only, or how does that work?
Great question. So we work very close with the Valley cities and others, and Detective Singyal assists other agencies with their investigations all the time. Okay. So we're glad to do it. We help each other all the time, but yes, for sure.
To be part of it.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. So I want to clarify something. Nothing is changing as far as having to get warrants. The information that we're getting is not changing. It's just that it will be done by the software instead of an investigator.
Correct. So all the process and all the safeguards are the same. The data is never leaves our control in terms of our evidence for it. It doesn't go to a third party and come back. It stays with the investigators as it always has.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we were doing this already, just in a different method. So I'm guessing is there a policy for this already, and will there be a policy? Because there will be the change in method.
Right.
So there would need to be a new policy. Is that already in the works? Or once you get the okay, if you get the okay, is that when the work would start on that?
I'm going to hold on the policy question for Detective Singyal, but in terms of what predominantly governs this is rule of evidence and law requirements under the Constitution and state constitution. So we have to, so that's where the probable cause for the search warrant comes in. That's where the exigent circumstances for the cell carriers in terms of missing persons come in. That is more, so it's more about law and following constitutional law that guides what we do. But I'll let the detective jump in there.
Sorry, and if you could repeat your question, I forgot it, but I did want to touch on the note.
I was just wondering about the policy. We will need to change the policy since we're going to be doing this in-house, wouldn't we? Even though we're still have the same purposes of the cause?
I guess I'm unaware of the actual policy. The acquisition of the records doesn't change. The legal process for getting the records doesn't change. What this allows us to do is more efficiently analyze those records.
Right, but we would have something codified so that it says these are the reasons, even if it's saying that, we will still follow the law and that, you can do it for A, B, and C. You can't do it to find somebody because they took my dog and I'm upset about that.
Exactly. I mean, we vet all those. We do help outside agencies all the time, but we certainly hold them to those same standards. And I mean, most of the people we help are all on the same page as we are. And so they realize, hey, I have to have this standard set, whether it be a search warrant or an administrative subpoena or some type of exigency. And even in certain matters of exigency, we still have to provide the courts with an after-the-fact warrant in certain scenarios.
And I realize it's probably a hard comparison, but are you able to tell us about how much time it would have saved for the two cases that the chief mentioned today?
So I get the privilege of getting to access it through my partnership with the federal government. And I can tell you that in my experiences in using it, it is highly efficient. And a lot of the stuff that I've had to do in Excel, and we all have spent time in Excel and know how painstaking that can be sometimes. This does it way quicker than I ever could in Excel. However, to quality control that, and we've really kind of pushed this quality control issue, is at least working with my federal counterparts, anytime you make a finding or some other type of discovery where it's monumental to the case, it's always peer reviewed. And so, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Will you look at it? Here's the original records. A lot of times they'll use it in a separate software system, and then they'll go ahead and analyze and map those records to see if they came up with the same conclusion. So we try to double check our work all the time, and so certainly that would be built into it. And we kind of do that already as it is with the existing software that we use now.
Hey, thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question, so I apologize.
You did.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. So just to kind of piggyback off both Councilmember Fisher and Councilmember Boyce's questions. So in the scenario of Des Moines wanting help, Des Moines would still have to present a search warrant. They would still have to have that legal documentation.
So if they wanted help from us, say it was something that didn't require exigency and they had records that they wanted to analyze, we always ask for a copy of the warrant. A lot of times we always ask for the original records because we do go into the records, we make modifications. And so as soon as we get those records, we create a folder, original, then we create a folder that says working. Any modifications would be cataloged in the working folder, but we can always reference the original. And we rely heavily on what's in the warrant a lot of times because we want to know specific times and locations that may not have been disclosed to us at the time that they were, hastily asking for assistance. So, but I don't know of any agency around here that would have gotten records with cell site data, IP logs, all sorts of other types of carrier records without a search warrant, because carriers they scrutinize those requests for records.
So they would still request it from the carrier themselves. They would just come to us for
To analyze.
Okay.
Yes.
So, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, can I have a motion, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I move to authorize.
I rambled.
Are we good? Oh. I move to authorize the mayor to sign a contract with Gladiator Forensic LLC to purchase software equipment, license, and maintenance fee for a total cost of $139,280.52 for an initial 5-year term, with option to extend the contract annually thereafter up to a maximum contract term of 10 years, subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the police chief and city attorney.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion passes. And let's see, I guess that brings us to the end of our agenda, because we're going to move the information-only item to our council meeting at 7. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you back here for workshop at 5 o'clock. We are adjourned.